Okay, your downstream soap injector is not working. Let's see if we can figure out what the problem is. There's 3 things that we have you check. We're gonna take a look at one of our 4 gallon a minute pressure washers, but any of these steps are gonna apply to any of the systems that we built, high flow, hot water, all of that kind of stuff. So as long as it's a downstream soap injector. So first thing we're gonna check, let's just make sure that the soap injector is in the right position. So there are always arrows on those injectors to designate which direction the flow needs to be in order for it to work. So you see these little arrows right here. The water's coming from the pump, going through, and then towards the high pressure hose. As long as that's in place in the right way, we'll check the next thing. You need to make sure you're using a low pressure soap nozzle. They typically look like this whenever you buy a new machine. It's black with brass, and it has a much larger orifice on it compared to the high pressure nozzle. So you can see the difference here. Sometimes you have low pressure assemblies like our illuminator here where you're using low pressure soap nozzles. They just look a little bit different. Just make sure it's low pressure. If you don't have a soap nozzle to test with, just don't use any nozzle at all in the wand assembly, and that'll still give you low pressure. It'll draw soap the same way. The next thing we're gonna have you check is to make sure that in your soap bucket, you've actually got the hose submerged all the way. So on here, we have a strainer at the bottom. So we have to make sure that that strainer is actually in the water all the way, or in the liquid all the way. If you don't have a strainer on, at least make sure the bottom of your hose is submerged, because sometimes they'll go in, they'll curl up. So just make sure that that is in the liquid all the way. Doesn't have to be at the bottom of the bucket, just has to be covered at the bottom of it. Okay, so after those 3 things, fire up that system, see if any of those solve the issue. If it doesn't, then we will work on the next things for you to check. Okay, so next step is to check and see if the injector is actually siphoning anything. So what we're gonna do at this point is we're gonna take a look at the injector. We're going to disconnect the hose from the injector. So I recommend putting gloves on whenever you go to do this, or having some kind of eye protection just in case this sprays whenever you're pulling the hose off. It shouldn't have any back pressure behind it, but just in case, you never know. So this one doesn't really have any chemical in the line right here because I kind of already emptied it out. So we're just gonna take this off. It usually comes off really easy. I'm just trying not to slam my hand against the side of this frame. So pops off nice and easy. Take the end of it, put it back into your chemical container so it doesn't drip anywhere. And you have just this open barb right here. So what I have you do next is turn on the pressure washer with either, I like to try it with no nozzle in it. So no nozzle, turn on the pressure washer. I've only got 50 feet of hose in the regular gun wand assembly. So that's kind of, you know, nice and easy. There's not a lot of things down the line that can cause other issues. So when you fire it up, you should be able to feel suction right here just by putting the tip of your finger over it. If it has really good suction, it can kind of hurt a little bit, so be careful. That's why I usually have the glove, because you can use the glove and you can just see it pull on the glove a little bit, and you don't have to actually use your skin to do that. But just find out real quick, if there's suction right there, then it's not the injector. You've got something going on down the line or something prior to it that is causing too much pressure, or you're not getting enough water flow. So if you're not getting enough water flow, it could be your unloader out of adjustment. It could be a blockage where you're not getting enough water through your pump if the filter is clogged, or you're just not getting enough water from the customer's water supply for this injector to work properly. If it's something else, if you've checked those things already, it could be creating too much pressure. So for example, your nozzle could be too big. The nozzle could be too small, creating more pressure. You could have a clog or something going on in a hose, creating more pressure. You could have too much hose. If you have more than 100 feet of hose, depending on the injector, it might not work. If you have a high flow injector, if you have more than 200 feet of hose, that might be causing the problem. Or we've had where, if you're using high pressure ball valves, we've had where these either were partially closed, or they just weren't working properly, and they actually weren't opening up all the way, even when it looked like it was in the open position. We've had trigger guns that are partially clogged. So you just work your way down the line. So I always start with, take the nozzle out. If it works after the nozzle's out, then then try again with a larger nozzle. Take some of the sections of hose off. Try it without your ball valve on there. Try it without your trigger gun on there. Just make sure that, you know, all of this is at low pressure. You don't have a high pressure nozzle in there. So number one, you're not gonna hurt yourself. And number two, it's easy to test these things. You just work your way back further and further down the line. So that's really the best recommendation if you don't have other things such as you know, downstream manifolds to check, or remote bypass or chemical injector bypasses to check. So we'll go over those things in the next segment, but as far as basic checking goes, just work your way back, starting with the accessories.